I never thought my life would change forever in the middle of a golden New York afternoon, under the warm light slipping through the trees in Central Park. I was supposed to be on top of the world, or at least that's what I told myself. 12 years of marriage, a beautiful apartment on the Upper West Side, and a career as a rising star in marketing strategy. My name is Emily Bennett, and I had always believed I was one of the lucky ones. But no one tells you that luck can shatter in a single breath. That day I was walking through the park, phone in hand, absent-mindedly scrolling through campaign reports, when a familiar voice called out, "Emily?" I turned to see Sophie, my college roommate, someone I hadn't seen in months. We hugged, we laughed, and then something in her face changed. A flicker of hesitation, a darting glance. "Are you okay?" I asked. She took a breath, lips trembling slightly. I probably shouldn't say this, but... In that instant, my stomach tightened. I felt a strange cold rush slide down my spine, though I had no reason to suspect anything yet. Sophie hesitated again, looking almost guilty. "I saw Nathan earlier today," she whispered. "Nathan, my husband. My Nathan. He was making dinner reservations." I smiled, a little confused. "Oh, he didn't tell me." Her face softened with pity, and that's when I knew. My heart dropped to the pit of my stomach before she even finished. He wasn't alone, Emily. The world tilted. I remember the rustle of the trees, the shouts of children playing, a dog barking nearby. All of it became muffled, distant, as if I were suddenly underwater. My hands trembled around the shopping bags I had just picked up. I opened my mouth, but no sound came. "Are you sure?" I wanted to ask. But I knew Sophie, and I knew she wouldn't say something like this if she weren't sure. "I thought you should know," she added quietly. "I'm so sorry." I don't remember walking back to my apartment. I don't remember how I made it across the crowded sidewalks or how I managed to unlock the door. What I do remember is the moment I stood in front of the hallway mirror, staring at the woman looking back at me. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and hollow. Who was she? I called the restaurant, the River Cafe, one of the most romantic spots in Brooklyn. My voice was steady, almost sweet. "Hi, I'm confirming a reservation tonight for Nathan Bennett." "Yes, ma'am." "Table for 2, 8 o'clock. Table for 2. That phrase hit like a physical blow. I could feel something fracture deep, inside me, something that might never heal. I thanked the hostess, hung up, and sat on the edge of our perfectly made bed, letting the silence settle around me. I thought about the past 12 years, about the anniversary trips, the late night talks, the small rituals we shared, morning coffee, weekend runs, inside jokes no one else understood. I thought about how often Nathan had been working late or traveling for deals, how I had noticed the new cologne, the sudden gym obsession, the password change on his phone. I had brushed away all the little red flags. Until now. As I sat there, my heart racing, I realized something surprising. Underneath the tidal wave of pain was a strange clarity. I wasn't going to fall apart. I wasn't going to scream or cry or call him in a storm of fury. No. I was going to do something far more powerful. I was going to watch him shatter. I stood up, walked to my closet, and carefully picked out a black dress, one Nathan had never seen. Sleek, understated, elegant. I did my makeup with precision, smoothing on the foundation, sharpening the eyeliner, blotting the deep red lipstick until it was perfect. I curled my hair softly around my shoulders. I would not walk into that restaurant, looking like a broken woman. By 7:45, I arrived at the River Cafe. The maître d' greeted me warmly, and I requested a table with a clear view of the room. As I sat there, hidden behind a polished column, I could see the soft glow of the candlelit tables, the Brooklyn Bridge lit up beyond the glass windows, the polished silverware gleaming. And then, at precisely 8:03, he walked in. Nathan, the man who had kissed me goodbye that morning, telling me he'd be home early. He was adjusting his tie, nervous, smiling. And beside him was a woman I had never seen before. She was tall, striking, with chestnut hair and a slim red dress that hugged her curves like a second skin. She laughed softly as Nathan leaned in close to whisper something, his hand resting on the small of her back. My lungs constricted. From across the room, I watched as they ordered drinks, laughing, leaning toward each other like teenagers on a first date. Nathan reached across the table to touch her hand, a touch he hadn't given me in months. She wore a delicate diamond bracelet, one that looked eerily similar to the missing charge on our credit card statement last month, the business expense he'd brushed off so easily. My hands curled into fists on my lap. I could have stormed over, flipped the table, and let the whole restaurant bear witness to the truth. But no. Something inside me had hardened, something colder and more dangerous. Instead, I signaled to the waiter. "Do you see that man over there?" I asked softly. "The one in the navy suit?" He nodded, understanding immediately. "I'd like you to deliver a note to him. Just him. And if possible, I'd like to watch his reaction." The waiter smiled slightly, as if he'd done this before. "Of course, ma'am." I took out a small notepad from my purse, wrote the words slowly, carefully, and folded the note. As I handed it to the waiter, I felt an odd surge of power rush through me, like lightning running under my skin. What happened next felt like a scene from a movie. I watched as the waiter approached Nathan's table, leaned down discreetly, and placed the folded note by Nathan's plate. "For you, sir," I saw him say. Nathan looked up, surprised. He reached for the note, unfolded it, and read the words, "Enjoy your dinner. I hope the lies taste as sweet as your success." His face transformed in an instant. Confusion flickered, then realization, then pure, unmistakable panic. His eyes darted wildly across the restaurant, scanning, searching, desperate. And then he saw me. I raised my glass slowly, offering a small, deliberate toast, locking eyes with him across the room. For 10 excruciating seconds, we stared at each other, 1,000 unsaid words passing between us. Then, without breaking eye contact, I stood up, turned, and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Nathan frozen, the woman beside him looking bewildered. The night air was crisp as I stepped outside. I inhaled deeply, feeling the coolness fill my lungs. Only then, when I was safely out of sight, did I let the first tear fall. Nathan didn't come home that night. I sat alone in our darkened apartment, watching the hours tick by. My phone buzzed relentlessly, calls, texts, desperate pleas. "Emily, please, let me explain. Please answer." But I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to hear excuses. I wasn't ready to let him explain away a betrayal that had been months, maybe years in the making. What Nathan didn't know was that the woman he thought he knew, the devoted, trusting Emily, was gone. In her place stood someone new. Someone who had just written the first line of a story that would change both of our lives forever. And this was only the beginning. If you want to follow the rest of this incredible story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and support us so we can bring you more powerful, emotional, and unforgettable stories like this one. Your support means everything, and trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. Before you go, here's a fun little question for you. Quiz time. In this story, what did Emily choose to do at the restaurant? A. Confront Nathan and cause a public scene. B. Deliver a silent but powerful note and walk away. Comment your answer, A or B below. We're excited to see what you think, and stay tuned for the next part of this jaw-dropping journey. The night after I left the River Cafe, I sat in the darkened living room, staring out at the skyline, my reflection faintly visible in the glass. My heart had been hammering so hard. When I walked out of that restaurant, I wasn't sure if I'd make it to the car without collapsing. But I had. And I drove home in a kind of fog, trembling, cold, yet wide awake. Nathan didn't come home that night. At first, I stared at the door, waiting for his keys, the sound of his shoes in the hallway. But as midnight crept past, then 1, then 2 in the morning, I understood. He was hiding, running, maybe trying to explain himself to Victoria, maybe trying to decide how he'd face me, or whether he even could. I sat there motionless, as the hours passed. My phone buzzed over and over, texts piling up, missed calls. I didn't answer a single one. What could he possibly say that would make it better? By dawn, I was still awake, still in the same spot. My body felt stiff, my skin tight with exhaustion, but my mind was racing too fast to rest. I thought back to the moment when Nathan's eyes met mine across the restaurant, when his face turned ashen and his body tensed with panic. That moment had seared itself into my memory, and even now, as painful as it was, it gave me a strange, fierce satisfaction. I had controlled the story. I had flipped the script. I hadn't allowed him to spin the lie. When Nathan finally walked in at dawn, his appearance was startling. His shirt was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot, his jaw dark with stubble. He looked like a man who'd been up all night unraveling, a man who thought he had everything, only to realize the ground beneath him was gone. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand. "No," I said quietly. My voice didn't even sound like mine. It was calm, too calm. "Sit down." He hesitated, then slowly dropped onto the armchair across from me, shoulders hunched. "Who is she?" I asked. "She's nobody," he mumbled. "Just someone from work." It didn't mean anything. I let out a dry, brittle laugh that scraped against my throat. "Try again, Nathan." He winced. "Emily, I can explain the bracelet. You bought her? The one I pointed out at Tiffany's last year? The one you said was too expensive for me?" I saw his face crumple, his body shrinking into itself. His voice was barely a whisper. 6 months. 6 months, I repeated, tasting the bitterness of the words. Half a year. Half a year of lies, of pretending, of smiling at me across the dinner table while he was texting her under the table. "Do you love her?" I asked, the question cutting through me like a blade. He hesitated, just a fraction of a second, but enough. "I don't know what I feel anymore." That was the moment I knew. The man in front of me wasn't the Nathan I had married 12 years ago. Or maybe he was. Maybe I had just never seen the full picture. The next few days passed in a haze. We moved around the apartment like ghosts, careful not to bump into each other. We exchanged only the necessary words. The mail came. "Your sister called. We're low on milk." Neither of us brought up the obvious. Nathan watched, me waiting for me to crack, to beg, to plead for us to work it out. But I didn't, because something inside me had shifted. While he tried to pretend nothing had changed, I was quietly gathering my strength. I went to the gym, ran until my lungs burned. I called my cousin Olivia, a lawyer in Chicago, and asked her, hypothetically, what someone should do when facing a cheating spouse with a complicated financial situation. I reconnected with Sophie, who had been checking in on me every day since that afternoon in Central Park. She invited me to a small women's gathering, a local group for women navigating heartbreak, betrayal, and divorce. At first, I resisted. I didn't want to sit in a circle and pour out my pain to strangers. But Sophie insisted. "Emily, you don't have to go there to cry. Go there to listen. Go there to remember you're not alone." And so I did. That night, I found myself sitting among a group of women in a cozy Brooklyn loft, sipping tea, hearing story after story of heartbreak. Women who had faced cheating partners, financial betrayals, hidden lives. But what struck me wasn't the pain in their voices. It was the resilience, the way they spoke of rebuilding, of claiming their own power. Something inside me stirred. I left that night with a small card tucked in my pocket. The name of a financial advisor someone recommended, someone who specialized in helping women protect their assets during high-conflict separations. I began to look at Nathan differently. While he tiptoed around me, acting like we were waiting for a decision, I was already making mine. I stayed quiet, but behind the scenes, I started pulling threads. I dug through credit card statements. I searched his laptop when he was out, finding old emails, unfamiliar names, transactions that didn't make sense. I pieced together hotel stays, last-minute business trips, gifts, dinners. But it wasn't just the affair. There was something more, something darker. Nathan's work had always been shrouded in secrecy. As a hedge fund manager, he thrived on inside tips, market movements, whispers passed between closed doors. But as I pulled up one email after another, I realized he had crossed lines. Not just marital, but legal. I found correspondence between him and Victoria, discussing sensitive details about her tech company, details that were influencing his trades. Insider trading. The realization hit me like a fist. This wasn't just a personal betrayal. This was a criminal one. For days, I moved silently through our apartment, cataloging everything, taking screenshots, photographing documents, backing up files. Nathan seemed relieved that I wasn't screaming, not realizing that my silence was the most dangerous thing of all. At night, when he thought I was asleep, I would slip into the guest room and carefully go through his office. I found hidden files, offshore account details, messages on encrypted apps. The picture came into focus. Nathan was using his relationship with Victoria not just for pleasure, but for profit. One night, I sat on the floor of the guest room, surrounded by papers, and felt the tears finally come. Not just for the loss of my marriage, but for the loss of the man I thought I knew. I had believed in Nathan, in his ambition, his dreams, his charm. I had built a life with him, supported him, trusted him. And now, as I stared at the evidence of his duplicity, I realized he had been building a life I was never meant to be part of. But here's the thing about heartbreak. Once you hit the bottom, there's nowhere to go but up. By the end of that week, I wasn't just planning for divorce. I was planning for something bigger. I wasn't going to walk away quietly, leaving Nathan to continue his schemes unchecked. I was going to protect myself, my future, and, if necessary, burn down the house he had built on lies. The next step would take courage. I had to confront Victoria, the woman whose name I had learned to hate. But I wasn't doing it for revenge or drama. I needed the missing pieces. I needed to know how deep Nathan's deception went. I reached out to her through an anonymous message, asking to meet. To my surprise, she agreed. As I prepared for that meeting, I felt something shift inside me. A cold, sharp focus, like a blade being honed. I wasn't the Emily who had stood trembling in the restaurant, or the Emily who had cried herself to sleep in the guest room. I was someone new. Someone dangerous. And as I slipped on my coat and stepped out into the night, I knew this was only the beginning of the storm I was about to unleash. The night I arranged to meet Victoria, the city felt unnervingly quiet. My hands were cold, my heart pounding. Yet there was a calm determination inside me I had never felt before. I had chosen a quiet wine bar near Columbus Circle, somewhere neutral, where we wouldn't be recognized, where we could talk without the weight of Nathan's shadow looming over us. Victoria arrived 15 minutes late, stepping inside with an uncertain glance. Up close, she looked younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with a sleekness that belonged to someone used to commanding a room. But tonight, there was a tightness in her jaw, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. She sat down across from me cautiously, like a person unsure whether they were walking into a confrontation or a trap. "I wasn't sure if I should come," she said, her voice clipped. "Yet here you are," I replied quietly, studying her. We sat for a long moment in silence. Then she exhaled, ordering a glass of red wine. "I assume you want me to stay away from Nathan?" she said. There was a hard edge in her voice, as if she were preparing for me to attack, to accuse. But I surprised her. "No, I'm here to thank you." That startled her. She blinked, her shoulders stiffening. "Thank me?" "Yes, for showing me who Nathan really is." I sipped my drink calmly, watching as her walls began to crack. "I've spent 12 years building a life with him. You helped me see that it was all built on lies." Her face paled slightly. She tried to hold her composure, but the flicker of uncertainty had already appeared. "I don't know what you're talking about," she murmured. "Really?" I leaned forward slightly. "Did you know he and I renewed our vows last year in Maui? Did you know we were planning to start a family this spring?" I was lying, but I needed to see her reaction. And there it was. Shock, confusion, betrayal flashing across her features. He said you two were basically done," she stammered. "That you were living separate lives." I gave her a small, pitying smile. "Did he tell you that, while he was using your insider information to plan his trades?" Her eyes widened, fear replacing confusion. "I've seen the emails, Victoria, the documents, the private chats. You've been feeding him sensitive information, and he's been using it to position his firm for a major acquisition. Did you know that part?" She shook her head slightly, but her hands were trembling now. "Here's the truth," I said softly. "Nathan's been lying to both of us. To you, to me, to his company, to everyone. You're just one more piece in a very dangerous game he's been playing, and I'm not here to fight over him." Victoria's eyes darted to the door, as if calculating how quickly she could escape. "I'm here because women should warn each other about men like him," I added gently. For the first time, her expression softened, the armor slipping. She reached for her wine glass but didn't drink. "Why are you telling me this?" she whispered. "Because you still have a chance to step away," I said. "You still have a chance to protect yourself. I don't think Nathan cares what happens to you once he's done with you." The rest of the conversation unfolded slowly. Piece by piece, Victoria confirmed what I suspected. She had been manipulated into sharing sensitive corporate data, believing Nathan's promises of a future together, believing he was waiting for the right moment to leave me. But now, with the truth in front of her, the facade was crumbling. By the end of the meeting, she handed me a flash drive. "These are the records I kept. Emails, voice memos, files he asked for," she said quietly. "I don't know why. I saved them. Maybe some part of me always knew this would end badly." I slipped the drive into my purse, thanked her, and left without another word. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the dark window, listening to the faint hum of the city below. I felt the weight of everything pressing down, the betrayal, the years of deception, the cold, hard truth that my marriage wasn't just broken, it had been a lie for a long time. But I also felt something else. Resolve. The next morning, I made calls. I met with the financial advisor recommended by the women's group, moving part of our joint assets into a protected account in my name only. A legal move I could justify, since half of it was rightfully mine. I called Olivia again, asking for her legal expertise, and she began helping me document every detail. Every night, after Nathan fell asleep, or more often pretended to, I worked late, backing up evidence, taking photos of receipts, organizing files. I created a private digital archive of everything I found, labeling folders, cross-referencing dates, highlighting connections. I even found offshore accounts I never knew existed, accounts Nathan had set up without my knowledge, quietly funneling money into investments that he claimed were too risky for our shared portfolio. Each discovery chipped away at whatever remaining love I thought I had for him. I no longer cried. I no longer raged. I simply worked. Quietly, methodically, with the kind of precision Nathan had always admired in me. Only now, I was using it against him. One night, after days of digging, I found something that made me freeze in place, a folder labeled Meridian Acquisition Private. Inside were documents outlining Nathan's plan for a hostile takeover of Meridian Technologies, using insider information obtained through his relationship with Victoria. This wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. I sat there, staring at the screen, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack open. I realized in that moment that Nathan wasn't just a cheating husband or a selfish man. He was a criminal. And if I stayed silent, if I walked away quietly, I would become complicit in his crimes. I called Olivia immediately. Hypothetically, I began, my voice shaking. If someone discovered evidence of insider trading in their spouse's files, what should they do? Olivia was silent for a moment, then spoke carefully. Emily, if what you're describing is real, this person could face serious charges. We're talking about SEC violations, federal investigations, possible jail time. I pressed a hand to my forehead, trying to steady my breathing. Could it affect me? Could I be dragged down with him? Only if you stay silent, she replied softly. But if you cooperate, if you provide evidence, you protect yourself. I hung up, the weight of the decision crashing over me. I thought about everything Nathan and I had built, the life we had, the memories, the history. But then I thought about the woman I had become over the past few weeks. A woman who had survived heartbreak, betrayal, and humiliation. A woman who had faced down her own fear and emerged stronger. I wasn't going to let Nathan take that away. Next morning, I sat across from him at breakfast, calmly buttering a piece of toast. He watched me warily, as if trying to read my mind. "You seem different," he said, voice cautious. I smiled faintly. "Do I?" He hesitated. "Emily, I've been thinking, maybe we should go to counseling. Maybe we can fix this." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the man I had loved, but the stranger he had become. "It's too late for that, Nathan," I said quietly. His face crumpled slightly, a flicker of panic in his eyes. "Please don't make any rash decisions. I've ended things with Victoria. I want to make this work." I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered the files, the lies, the years of manipulation. "Tell me something," I said softly. "Did you end things with her because you realized you love me, or because you're afraid of losing everything you've built?" His hesitation was all the answer I needed. I stood up, finished my coffee, and smiled calmly. "By the way, she called last night." Nathan froze. "Who?" "Victoria." his face drained of color. What? What did she say? We had a lovely chat, I replied, enjoying the flicker of terror in his eyes. She seems to think you two were planning a future together. Funny, since you just told me you ended things. He sank into his chair, his head in his hands. Emily, I can explain. You've explained enough, I said softly, grabbing my purse. I'm going out. Don't wait up. As I closed the door behind me, I heard the unmistakable sound of something shattering against the wall. Good, I thought. Let him feel it. Let him start to understand that the life he'd so carefully constructed was about to come crashing down. Because the old Emily was gone. And the woman walking out into the crisp New York morning wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready. The morning of Nathan's big board meeting dawned clear and sharp, the kind of autumn day when the city seems electric with possibility. I stood by the window of my apartment, looking down at the bustle of the streets, coffee in hand, a strange calm settling over me. This was the day everything would change. Nathan had no idea I was coming. I watched him that morning as he prepared, knotting his lucky tie, the one he always wore for major presentations. His confidence was back, the panic of recent days smoothed over, as if he truly believed the past few weeks were just a bump in the road. Good luck today, I said sweetly, leaning in to kiss his cheek. He turned, surprised but pleased, a flicker of relief in his eyes. Thank you, Em. That means a lot. I smiled, serene. Actually, I'll meet you there. He blinked. Wait, you're coming to the board meeting? I tilted my head. Of course, I wouldn't miss such an important day for you. Something flickered behind his eyes then, a tiny flash of unease. But he said nothing, only gave me a tight smile and hurried out the door. I took my time dressing, pulling on a tailored black suit, understated but sharp. I wanted to walk into that boardroom, looking not like a betrayed wife, but a woman of power. I gathered the folders I had carefully prepared over weeks, printed copies of the emails, the financial records, the documents from Victoria, all neatly organized, each page a nail in the coffin Nathan had built for himself. As I entered the towering glass building of Nathan's firm, Matthews Capital, the receptionist greeted me with a warm smile. Mrs. Bennett, it's been so long since we've seen you here. I smiled politely. I believe they're expecting me upstairs. She offered to escort me, but I declined. I wanted to walk the halls myself. Feel the weight of each step, each moment, each heartbeat bringing me closer to the reckoning. The boardroom was already filling when I arrived. Men and women in sleek suits, holding coffees, chatting softly, as they waited for the meeting to begin. Nathan was at the far end of the table, deep in conversation with the firm's general counsel. When his eyes landed on me, his smile faltered for just a second before he smoothed it over. He excused himself quickly and came over. What are you doing here? He hissed softly, though his public smile never wavered. Supporting my husband, I said sweetly, just loud enough for a few nearby board members to hear. I wouldn't miss it for the world. He gripped my elbow, trying to steer me aside. Emily, this isn't the time. I leaned in close. Relax, Nathan. I'm just here to watch. Before he could reply, the chairman called the meeting to order. Nathan had no choice but to take his seat, while I sat calmly along the wall, poised and attentive, my folders resting lightly on my lap. The first hour was uneventful. Quarterly financials, market projections, routine reports. Nathan gradually relaxed, slipping into the confident, persuasive persona he wore so well, the one that had once charmed me, that had built his empire. Finally, the chairman turned to him. Nathan, I believe you have a special presentation today. Nathan stood, his smile confident, clicking to his first PowerPoint slide. Thank you, Richard. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm thrilled to present a unique opportunity, the potential acquisition of Meridian Technologies. I watched him work the room, his voice smooth, his arguments compelling. He outlined the financials, the strategic advantages, the insider knowledge that gave them a competitive edge, the same insider knowledge I knew he had stolen. When he concluded, the room filled with murmurs of approval. The chairman smiled broadly. Very impressive, Nathan. Before we move to questions, however, we have one more agenda item. Mrs. Bennett has requested to address the board as a significant shareholder. Nathan's head snapped toward me, his face draining of color. I rose slowly, walking to the front of the room. Connecting my laptop to the projector, I clicked to the first slide. A series of emails between Nathan and Victoria, discussing confidential details about Meridian Technologies. What you're looking at, I said calmly, is evidence of corporate espionage and insider trading. The room fell utterly silent. Nathan has been obtaining confidential information through an inappropriate relationship with a Meridian executive, I continued, clicking to the next slide. Bank transfers, hidden accounts, recorded conversations. As of this morning, the SEC has been provided with this information. Nathan shot to his feet. This is insane. She's making this up. Please let me finish, I said smoothly, not even turning to look at him. I have documented evidence of at least 17 instances where Nathan used non-public information to position Matthew's capital advantageously prior to this acquisition attempt. And furthermore, company funds were used to finance personal expenses related to the affair. I clicked again, revealing expense reports, hotel charges, gift receipts, every damning detail laid bare. The board members stared in stunned silence. The general counsel cleared his throat, voice grave. Mrs. Bennett, do you have copies of this documentation? I handed him a thick envelope. Everything's in here. I suggest you review it immediately. The SEC won't wait long. Nathan's desperation began to crack through. Emily, you can't... I finally turned to face him, my voice calm, almost kind. You did this, Nathan. I'm just making sure you can't take everyone else down with you. The chairman spoke next, his tone clipped. Nathan, I think it's best if you step out while we discuss this matter privately. This is my company, Nathan shouted, his voice rising in panic. A company with shareholders and legal obligations, the chairman replied firmly. Please wait outside. Nathan threw me a look of pure hatred as he stormed out. I gathered my folders, thanked the board, and calmly walked from the room. In the hallway, Nathan was waiting, his face contorted with rage. You've destroyed everything, he hissed. Was this your plan all along? To humiliate me? To ruin me? I stopped, tilting my head thoughtfully. No, Nathan. You destroyed everything the moment you decided to lie. To me, to the board, to yourself. He stepped closer, his voice cracking. They'll never prove it. I smiled faintly. Victoria kept records of everything. She's cooperating fully. It's over. As I turned to walk away, he called after me, his voice breaking. Emily, please, you can't just leave. We need to talk. I paused, looking back at him one last time. Check your email, Nathan. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce. And don't come home tonight, or ever again. Outside, the city air hit my face, crisp and cold, carrying with it a rush of relief so powerful it nearly took my breath away. I stood there on the sidewalk, head tilted back, feeling the sun on my skin. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt light. My phone buzzed. A message from Olivia. Just heard from my SEC contact. They're moving forward. You did it. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and smiled faintly. I hadn't just ended a marriage. I had reclaimed myself. My voice, my dignity, my future. And As I walked down the street, I knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning of the life I was finally ready to live on my own terms. 6 months after I walked out of Nathan's boardroom, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, overlooking the Hudson River, cradling a mug of coffee as the early morning light painted the water in soft pink and gold. The city pulsed below me, alive and relentless, but up here, everything felt still. It was a stillness I had never known inside the marriage I'd left behind, a stillness filled not with loneliness, but with quiet strength. The divorce had finalized just 3 weeks earlier. Given the storm that had engulfed Nathan, the SEC investigation, the criminal charges, the media frenzy, there hadn't been much room for negotiation. Olivia, my cousin and lawyer, had guided me through the process with razor-sharp precision, ensuring I took only what was rightfully mine. Half of our shared assets, minus the funds Nathan had squandered on Victoria and his offshore dealings. A small ownership stake in the firm, which had been handed over to the board in Nathan's absence. I hadn't wanted to destroy Nathan completely. I hadn't even wanted revenge. Not really. What I wanted, what I needed, was to break free from the web of lies, to claim back my life before it became collateral damage in his self-destruction. And standing here now, watching the ferries glide across the river, I knew I had done exactly that. Nathan, meanwhile, had become a shadow of the man he once was. The headlines had been merciless. Star hedge fund manager faces SEC charges. The double life of Nathan Bennett, affairs, espionage, and fraud. Bennett steps down amid federal probe. Mutual friends whispered about how he had aged 10 years in just a few months, how his once unshakable confidence had crumbled into something brittle and haunted. I should have felt triumphant. But the truth was, I mostly felt relieved. There was no joy in watching someone you once loved fall so hard. There was only a quiet vindication that the truth had finally surfaced, that I no longer had to carry the weight of his deception. My phone buzzed on the balcony railing, a text from Victoria. Just finished my SEC deposition. Thought you should know. They offered me immunity for full cooperation. It's finally over. Victoria and I had formed an unlikely alliance over these months. We weren't friends, not exactly, but we were bound by a strange shared experience, forged in the same fire. She had left New York for Chicago, starting over, determined to rebuild her life on her own terms. I had wished her well. I texted back simply, "Congratulations. Time for both of us to move forward." Moving forward. That had been my mantra for months now. It wasn't about forgetting what had happened. It wasn't even about forgiving Nathan, though over time, the sharp edges of my anger had softened into something closer to indifference. It was about refusing to let his betrayal define the rest of my life. I'd started my own boutique consulting firm, focusing on corporate ethics of all things. There was something darkly ironic about it, but also something deeply satisfying. I used everything I'd learned, from my years with Nathan, from watching the fallout of his collapse, to help small investment firms navigate issues of transparency, accountability, and governance. It was work that felt meaningful, work that reminded me I had more to offer the world than just the title of wife. Outside of work, I began rediscovering parts of myself I'd let slip away over the years. I picked up painting again, filling canvases with bold strokes and messy, unapologetic color. I started taking long walks through the city, letting myself get lost in its neighborhoods the way I used to when I was young. I reconnected with old friends I hadn't seen in years, letting their laughter pull me back into the rhythm of a life that wasn't defined by Nathan's orbit. And, maybe most surprising of all, I agreed to a dinner with Mark, a literature professor I'd met at a gallery opening. It wasn't love, not yet. It wasn't even a romance, but it was something gentle and real. A quiet reminder that my heart wasn't permanently closed, that I was still capable of connection, of curiosity, of seeing where something new might lead. My therapist often told me that healing wasn't about erasing the past, but about integrating it. About learning to hold both the pain and the growth, the betrayal and the resilience in the same hand. Some days I believed her. Other days, the doubt still crept in, whispering that maybe I had been a fool all along. But then I would catch sight of myself in the mirror, shoulders back, head high, eyes clear, and I knew I had earned every inch of this hard-won peace. One afternoon, a small package arrived at my apartment. It was my new business cards. Emily Bennett, corporate ethics consultant. I ran my fingers over the embossed letters, feeling a rush of quiet satisfaction. There was something powerful about seeing my name standing on its own, unmoored from Nathan's, no longer attached to anyone but myself. That night, as dusk settled over the city, I sat by the window and pulled out a blank sheet of paper. I began writing a letter I never intended to send. Nathan, I've been thinking about that night at the restaurant, how something as small as a folded note could rip open the elaborate story we had both been telling ourselves. You in your affair, me in my illusion of a faithful marriage. I don't hate you anymore. Hatred requires an investment of emotion I'm no longer willing to make where you're concerned. Instead, I've come to see our ending as inevitable. Not because love can't last, but because what we had wasn't love. Not really. It was a performance. A transaction. A habit. Real love doesn't require lies. It doesn't hide in hotel rooms or encrypted apps or offshore accounts. It stands in the light, imperfect but honest. I hope someday you find that kind of love. I hope someday I do too. The strangest part of all this is that I should thank you. Your betrayal forced me to discover a strength I never knew existed. It pushed me to rebuild my life on my own terms, not yours. It made me realize that the woman you underestimated, the woman you thought would quietly fade away, is still here. And she's not fading. So I guess what I'm saying is, that note I sent you that night didn't just change your life. It changed mine. And despite everything, I wouldn't take it back. Goodbye, Nathan. Emily, I folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer, a final act of closure, not for him, but for myself. Outside, the lights of the city glittered, casting long ribbons of gold across the water. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and watched as the last traces of daylight slipped below the skyline. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if there was a great love waiting for me, or if I would find joy in the quiet of my own company. I didn't know if my work would flourish, or if I would one day leave the city for somewhere quieter, somewhere softer. But for the first time in years, I was excited to find out. The woman who had once defined herself as Nathan Bennett's wife was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who had learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply tell the truth, walk away, and never look back. Emily Bennett's story is not just a tale of betrayal. It's a powerful journey of awakening, resilience, and reclaiming one's life after deception. Over the course of 12 years, Emily believed she had built a strong, loving marriage with Nathan, a successful hedge fund manager. From the outside, they were the perfect couple. Polished, ambitious, deeply connected. But beneath that glossy exterior, cracks were spreading. Tiny betrayals Emily chose to ignore. Small shifts she explained away, until the truth could no longer be denied. The moment Emily discovered Nathan's affair wasn't the moment her life ended. It was the moment her real life began. What's so striking about her journey is not just that she caught her husband cheating, but the way she chose to respond. She didn't lash out in fury. She didn't break down publicly. And she didn't shrink into the shadows. Instead, she gathered herself, centered her emotions, and reclaimed control over her own narrative. She walked into that restaurant not to collapse, but to deliver a note. 15 carefully chosen words that shattered the carefully crafted lies Nathan had built. But Emily's strength didn't stop at one dramatic evening. Over the following weeks and months, she stepped into her own power more deeply than she ever had before. She became strategic, documenting Nathan's financial betrayals, uncovering his corporate crimes, and aligning herself with unexpected allies, even the woman who had unknowingly become part of his deception. Together, they pieced together the truth, not just of Nathan's personal failings, but of his professional misconduct. What makes this story resonate so deeply is the transformation Emily undergoes. She moves from the role of the betrayed wife, someone who has been lied to, sidelined, underestimated, to the role of the architect of her own future. She doesn't simply walk away from her marriage. She reclaims her financial independence, her professional identity, and, most importantly, her emotional strength. By the end, Emily has not only survived Nathan's betrayal, but has used it as the catalyst to rebuild a life that is richer, more authentic, and fully her own. So, what's the real lesson here? It's this. Betrayal, as devastating as it is, doesn't have to define you. What defines you is how you respond. Life will throw at you moments of heartbreak, loss, and deception, moments that shatter your illusions, break your routines, and leave you gasping for air. But inside those moments lies an extraordinary opportunity. The chance to rediscover your strength, to reset your values, to remember who you are outside of someone else's shadow. For anyone watching or listening, Emily's story invites you to reflect on your own life. Where have you settled for less than you deserve? Where have you accepted half-truths, convinced yourself that the little lies didn't matter? Where have you lost touch with your own dreams, your own voice, because you were too busy holding up someone else's world? The application to your own life doesn't require a dramatic betrayal or a public takedown. It's about pausing, asking yourself the hard questions, and giving yourself permission to act from a place of truth and courage. Maybe it's about ending a toxic relationship, setting boundaries at work, walking away from a career that no longer fulfills you. Or finally, investing time into passions you've put aside. Maybe it's about remembering that you are more than your roles, more than wife, husband, parent, employee, and that you are worthy of a life that reflects your deepest values and desires. Emily's story reminds us that we all hold the pen to our own narrative. Yes, people will betray, disappoint, or abandon us. Yes, life will blindside us with pain we didn't expect. But in the end, no one can steal your ability to choose how you rise, how you rebuild, and how you define what comes next. That power is, and always has been, yours. Now, to engage you even more, here's a little question for you. Quiz time. What was the most important turning point for Emily? A. The moment she confronted Nathan at the restaurant. B. The moment she chose to rebuild her life after the divorce. Comment your answer, A or B, below. We'd love to see your thoughts and hear why you chose that moment. Also, what's your personal takeaway from this story? Do you think Emily was right to expose Nathan so publicly? Would you have handled it the same way, or would you have taken a different path? Share your thoughts in the comments so everyone can learn from each other's perspectives. And don't forget, if you found this story powerful or inspiring, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. Your encouragement gives us the energy to keep bringing you more deep, meaningful content and stories that stay with you long after they're over. Thank you for being here, and we can't wait to share the next journey with you.